Jai Shri Krishna, Jai Shri Ramachandra, Vande Mataram, Bharat Mata Ki Jai. Today's video, as you may have already guessed, is about Bharat, the future of our country, our countrymen, our traditions, our culture, our legacy as a people, all in all. And since it's Independence Day, happy Independence Day to all of our viewers. This video is mainly going to focus on India's short-term future as well as the long-term future of our glorious country and what is going to happen when we'll regain our glory as a people and when we shall again establish our legacy as Bharatiyas, the Bharatiya Tattva, the Bharatiya Kalachara, when we'll be able to re-establish ourselves as what we are, when we'll be able to find who we are basically. It seems to be that in the present age, Indians have lost their sense of being. And we've basically forgotten our roots altogether. We speak an alien language. Even here, I'm speaking English. At home, we speak Tamil, Sindhi, and I love Sanskrit a lot. I converse in Sanskrit whenever I get the opportunity to do so. But unfortunately, in the present situation, I am unable to speak in a language of Indian origin. Like, for example, Hindi, though I have long wanted to speak in Hindi, and I'll probably try in this video here and there a little bit of Hindi. But as I'm learning this, I just realized that our country has lost a sense of being, lost a sense of who we are. When you look at the Supreme Court, the judges, when you look at our education system, when you look at every single place we're moving around, the roads we walk through, and the paths that we're treading today, everything seems to be stained with a colonial overhang, an overhang from the British Empire when they attempted to crush us with their feet. And we're basically still stuck in that era. It seems to be somewhere from every single angle. We seem to have lost our sense of being altogether as an Indian culture. And that is something we need to regain. But that's not as simple as, say, clicking a button and regaining our entirety. The problem that we have lost is enormous. The sense of being we have lost is enormous, and to regain it we have to do a lot of hard work as Indians, a lot of hard work. Every one of us needs to do it. And today's video is about what kind of situations created that problematic place for our nation, for our people who have almost always been on the number one spot, be it in global culture, be it in the economy, be it in spirituality. India has always been, Bharat has always been number one, except when the 17th century rolled in. Almost everything changed. For the entire Indian subcontinent, everything changed. Like a plague, the British Empire moved around the world, causing a lot of harm and misery everywhere. Of course, bringing in a little bit of significant technological development to the world, but at the same time causing a lot of harm. India, Bharat, also brought a lot of technological development to the world in the ancient times without bringing so much bloodshed, although. And that is something very regrettable, but there are astrological reasons for everything that has happened to our country and our neighbors and overall the country which is now, being condescendingly called as the third world, including Africa, of course. Today's video is going to be about Bharat entirely. Its short-term future especially. What is going to happen over the next few months is going to be our focus, because I just noticed that there are multiple planetary positions that are actually foreboding something for our country, especially in the coming few months. There's several reasons for this which we'll discuss in the present video, along with a long-term view of how things are going to be. Starting with the short-term view, this year, this Vedic lunar year started on the 21st of March 2023. And when I analyzed the positions for our country and when the Lunar New Year started for our country, there was a clear signal of a lot of violence that could take place after the 21st of March, which has already taken place significantly towards the northeast of India. And my main prognostication is that this might spread to other parts of the country. Violence is most likely to spread to several parts of the country, and there seems to be a conspiracy against the stability, especially the political stability of our country at the present moment. There seems to be a hidden agenda somewhere by some of our enemies probably, and it seems to be about to strike us very soon. And when I looked up the dashas and when I looked up the charts of when this structure of our nation was born, Bharat has had umpteen different types of structures, political structures in the past, some successful, some unsuccessful. For example, in the ancient past, we had the golden age of the Guptas, wherein we had a different political structure, an entirely different one. And then we came under the rule of the barbaric Mughals, and of course, some of them were good, not to mention all of them, but of course, many of them were barbarians to a large extent, and we came under their rule and we were subjugated entirely. Our culture was brought to its knees. Yet we survived, yet we thrived, but all of these were different political structures. The present political structure came into existence on the 15th of August 1947, especially on the 14th of August 1947 at around midnight 11 p.m. So I prepared a chart for this time frame and allowing some duration for the creation of our new country. And I took another important data for preparing a chart for our country. The second one was when India was proclaimed as a republic, and that was the 26th of January 1950 at around 10:18 a.m. So I prepared birth charts for both of these, and I found some very strange things about it. And when I dig deeper into the history of why the 14th or 15th of August was chosen as the Independence Day for our country, it really intrigued me into thinking a lot about how astrology has played a role in, shaping our country's future till date. So first of all, the 14th of August 1947, the entire world was going through a Kala Sarpa Yoga. And Lord Mountbatten, I regret to call him by the word Lord, by the way, because I don't think that human being deserves to be called Lord for all the things he's done in his lifetime, which are quite appalling. Overall, this person, Mountbatten, basically decided the future of when we are going to get independence and gave us a particular date and quote unquote to show he was the master, and basically gave us this date, 14th or 15th, and Pakistan and India respectively chose these particular dates, and we also technically got our independence a few hours before midnight, before August 15. And that, astrologically, why was August 15 chosen? These days a lot of people scoff at astrology as something, of the past, but a lot of people probably do not realize that astrology was key in deciding the time frame of when India would gain independence. For example, even the British Empire, it seems to be, chose this particular date so that India remain, culturally or politically inferior to their society, which later spread to the United States. So India should remain politically inferior. So that was the kind of arrangement that was made. Although I would like to also mention that this chain has long since broken, at least to an extent. So that way, there are a lot of good things that are going to come in. But leaving that topic aside, the astrological date for independence was chosen astrologically both by the British Empire and in a last moment attempt by the Indians. We did not want our independence to take place when the Krishna Chaturdashi Tithi was going on. That's just a few degrees away from the new moon, which is considered to be very inauspicious by ancient Hindus. So our country, we decided, Indians, of course, maybe after consulting with certain astrologers, that the Independence Day should be a few hours. Actually speaking, it was hardly a few hours before the next inauspicious Tithi takes place, and that's why it was chosen in the midnight. But whatever it is, we got independence during a date and a time and an hour which was exceedingly strange, and even if it was not outright inauspicious, there are a lot of things about that time frame which were not good, because of which for the next 48 years, which is the exact time frame for the Kala Sarpa Yoga, India went through a period of stagnation, and often we went into political instability, we went into economic crisis, we went into war. We went to war with our neighbor, and the neighbor, of course, was literally, of course, that's a different matter. Pakistan did not make a big, thing there, and India literally taught the nation a lesson overall. But to an extent, our country went through a lot of turmoil, a lot of difficulty, a lot of unnecessary, struggle. Although we did establish our bearings, and although we did prove what Bharatiya means, we still went through a lot of turmoil. And after, say, around 2020, so now recently, a lot of changes are actually coming up. in our country, as astrologically especially. And now the second chart which I took to analyze this was January 26, 1950. And this chart also showed some very difficult indications with, Rahu and Ketu basically taking over the quadrants, and therefore showing that the country would be in significant difficulty, at least for the first 50 years of its founding. By God's grace, of course, that era has almost elapsed now. And now, coupling with this together, our viewers might also recollect that in my previous videos I've talked about a new era altogether that's taking over the world at the present moment. These eras generally, had their influence for about 400 years. And each era is 400 years long based on astrology. How did we come to these 400 years number? It's basically that Jupiter and Saturn are in a deep, great conjunction every 20 years. When I say great conjunction, I mean that apparently from the Earth, we feel that Jupiter and Saturn are very close to each other, and their light, their energy is mixed together, and something happens that literally changes everything on the face of the earth the moment a great conjunction happens. And it is with this great conjunction information that I actually predicted the coronavirus pandemic and other significant dangers in 2020, apart from which I also talked about several different things that could happen in 2020 and upcoming years. One thing is clear: since 2020, the entire world has changed almost entirely and will continue to change over the next few years, especially over the next 2 decades. The whole world is likely to change unprecedentedly. Stability is something that will be thrown out of the window during this particular period. And has this happened before? Yes, there is historical evidence to prove that this has happened multiple times in the past. For example, as an example, 1600 was the previous 400-year period. And around 1600, there was a great conjunction that brought into picture the stock market, the European domination, slave trade, and sugar. 4 of the things that have changed the face of the earth for the last 400 years. For sugar, I think it's very simple to know how sugar has transformed the face of the earth. We just need to go and look at our kitchen and our own health. That's how sugar has changed us. And sugar was basically began spreading in a widespread manner, especially in its present form, only after 1600s. And coming back to the subject, yes, 1600s was the time when the whole world transformed entirely. The modern maps were created. We faced multiple big wars, humongous discoveries. Not everything would be bad. There would be a positive side to it as well. Major discoveries, the industrial civilization, and of course the negative complications of the same, and slave trade, torture of the so-called third world countries, which were once very rich, very significant and influential countries. All were brought to their knees. So what is this transformation? It is something, but it is basically a natural law. Power and wealth are known as Lakshmi in Sanskrit, Rajya Lakshmi and Dhana Lakshmi. So basically, both of these are unstable. They're both unstable. They basically do not have one place to stay. They have to keep moving. So there's a particular cycle for both power and wealth to move, which is why our ancient sages always told us that we shouldn't run behind these two. They come to specific places, to specific people in specific durations, and they leave. So that's not something we must be running behind. Anyone running behind something like this is sure to encounter a lot of distress in their own lives. A lot of people have gone behind these, a lot of countries have gone behind these and have ended in misery, because power and wealth have an exact place and time and situation to enter into a particular place and exit from there, which happens very swiftly at times. In the 1600s, power moved away from several parts of the world and concentrated itself in Europe, and more specifically in the British Empire, which lasted, say, for at least 200 years, after which, still the legacy of it is on. And now, 2020, everything has changed once again, and this 400-year cycle has reset. Has this happened way back in the past? Yes, it has happened in the 1200s when Genghis Khan was, ravaging the entire world, destroying almost everything in his way, and establishing his massive empire, although short-lived, but his massive empire, which had a significant impact on the future of the world for 400 years. Between 1200 and 1600, the world was impacted almost entirely by the Mongols, who later, morphed into the Mughals, and who later just conquered different parts of the world. Genghis Khan basically was proclaimed as Genghis Khan on 1206, the year 1206, which is when the Great Conjunction occurred, and that was the closest Great Conjunction. And something is very important we're going to discuss now, that it is 2020 that has been the closest Great Conjunction since 1206, or say since 1220 or whatever. So since from the last 800 years, 2020 has been the closest Great Conjunction. Now that's how important 2020 was. And if people recollect, there was no such thing heard before as a lockdown, and that happened in 2020. A global lockdown, billions of people staying back at home, trillions of dollars worth economies being closed down, and the entire brain structure of several people being changed over the course of the COVID transformation that the world has faced. So there's so many things that happened during that period, and also at the same time, the currents of power and wealth have again moved. Now this time out of Europe and into the countries that were formerly subjugated. So this time I believe that the third world countries, which were called third world technically, like Africa and parts of Southeast Asia, including our country, which was unfortunately called a third world country recently. Say even 30 years back we still had the same name. Even now, according to many people, we still carry the same name as a country, and that is going to change. And that is going to change, my friends, over the next 20 years, wherein both Africa and India and different parts of Southeast Asia will basically regain their stature and will come out of this image of a third world country and back to, their original glorious past. But there are a lot of things that are going to happen before this happens. A lot of bloodshed, unfortunately, and a lot of political transformation. Probably the entire structure that our country is currently resting on, the structure of our country is also going to change to a large extent. For example, the present constitution of India, although unfortunately I would like to mention this because it is part of the duty of an astrologer, the current constitution of India and the current recognition that India as a republic was established on the 26th of January 1950. And coming back to that subject, at 10:18 a.m., the horoscope showed a lot of turmoil. I don't think that this political structure might be long lasting, especially say for the next 1 or 2 centuries. There is a particular end to this present political structure, and there is likely to be a new political structure. And in the formation of this new political structure, there's going to be a lot of conflict, a lot of difficulties for the country, and this is going to happen around the world, including in Africa, for which I'll make a separate video. Now, starting with the most important point, the most specific changes will happen in the first half of 2024 for our country, because at that time the influence of Rahu will be at peak level for our country. A particular Antardasha is running within the Varshaphala chart for our country, and for those who know about astrology, they might make much more sense of this. But a Varshaphala chart shows that around the first half of 2024, coinciding with one of the biggest political questions of our country for the next year, it is going to coincide with the elections as well, and that is not a good time for our country for sure. The ensuing few months and the next year few months there are not good. But the positive news is that the economy of our country is going to continue transforming itself better and better over the next few decades. And unfortunately, as our country grows, one thing that I feel really bad about, whenever I say our country is growing, there's one part of me which feels happy, of course, because it's our motherland and our countrymen who will be happy. But there's another part of me which feels equally difficult when I say that the country is going to prosper. And that is that whenever a country prospers, the trend shows that people become more and more violent, both with each other and with animals, at least initially. So a lot of people become non-vegetarians and increase their non-vegetarian diet, their intake, everything goes bonkers. And that has already started to happen in India. Many people who ate very less non-vegetarian food will start consuming more, and more animals will be killed. There'll be much more pain and misery, probably more crime rates as the country expands massively, and things like that. So that's one angle which I feel is very difficult to fathom. And I would of course hope and pray earnestly, and I also request you all to hope and pray earnestly that our country lives up to its ideals, because we as Bharatiyas are not meant to run behind money, not meant to run behind assets, not meant to run behind unnecessary things which are not even long lasting. We are meant to stand by our culture and our tradition, which I think is the duty of every single Indian, every single Bharatiya. So हम जब तक भारतीय लोग, हम जब तक हमारे देश को आदर नहीं देते, हमारे देश को आदर नहीं देते, तब तक हमारे देश नहीं उठेगा. I apologize for my Hindi. It might not be as accurate, but I'm just trying a little bit in today's video. So that is very important. We have to stand up to our ideals. Ahimsa, satyam, akrodha, tyagah, shanti, apaishanam, non-violence, truthfulness, being kind to every single creature, compassion. These are the values that we have always lived by. We have not lived by GDP, not lived by economics entirely as a concept of life. We have lived as Bharatiyas, and I think we need to realize that now. We need to respect our culture. We need to respect the ancient sages who have laid down the rules and regulations of how to be an Indian, starting with Lord Sri Krishna himself. So every single Indian, irrespective of gender, irrespective of caste, irrespective of creed, all that doesn't even come into play, irrespective of even religion, must read the Bhagavad Gita and learn the values that are given in the Bhagavad Gita. For that is the central pivot of us as being a Bharatiya. So coming back to the predictions, and just to summarize what we have spoken, of course a more detailed video is going to come about this, entirely based on astrology. But in today's video, the main concepts we have covered is: 1. Power and wealth and overall prosperity is returning back to the countries that were subjugated since the 1200s and the 1600s. Number 2, very importantly, India will be one of the greatest rising economies of the future, especially in the next 20 years. However, number 3, this is not going to be a smooth process, and India is going to go through rapid transformation throughout this time frame. Along with other parts of the world, there will be significant bloodshed across the world, and there will be a lot of political transformation in India. The present political structure of our country isn't that likely to endure. For example, our present political structure has not been in vogue for even say about 75 years or say 77 years. It hasn't been in vogue. So we cannot guarantee that our country will continue to be what it is in the present political structure, and we Indians are ourselves confused about how our country basically works, and it basically isn't something that's closer to us. The whole system seems to be something just thrown on us by the British, and it needs a lot of repair. Some repair is being done here and there, but the entire structure is basically trembling at the present moment, and it needs a remake. I'm not sure when exactly this remake will happen, but I'm sure that it will happen somewhere, or it will start happening somewhere in the next 20 years. Starting with the constitution, starting with the laws, the law system, the legal system. Already a lot of people are complaining about this, but no change in the last 75 years. Now some change is likely to come into picture, and gradually there'll be a lot of change, but somewhere my analysis tells me that somewhere there should be a massive transformation in the very political foundation of our country. And more details to come soon in the future videos. Thank you. Jai Shri Krishna, Jai Shri Ramachandra, Jai Shri Lakshmi Narasimha. Vande Mataram, Bharat Mata Ki Jai.